Hello, everybody. Happy May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. Welcome back to the Gnomon live stream. My name is Adam Hartel. I'll be your host, and I am so excited for who we're going to be speaking with today. Just a little bit of housekeeping off the top. If you're not familiar with Gnomon, you're watching the reel that we just showed. We're a 3D art school located in Hollywood, California. We've been around for 25 years, and we specialize in training artists for careers in animation, games, and visual effects. I'm also joined by my colleague Xander today in the chat. So, at the end of our conversation with our fantastic guest, we will be sharing some things about Gnomon and whatnot. We are streaming live on YouTube, Twitch, and our Facebook live feed. If you are in need of closed captioning, head over to our Facebook page and catch our stream there. Closed captioning is going to be available on that platform. So without any further ado, I want to jump right into it and introduce our guest, Brian Matyas, who is a senior character concept designer at Lucasfilm. Brian is already getting a bunch of love in the chat. It seems that most people who are tuning in know exactly who we're going to be speaking with. But for those of you who don't, Brian is one of the lead concept designers and ushering in the new era of the live action Star Wars universe. Leading character concept development in the Lucasfilm Limited Art Department. He is known for his work on the Emmy Award-winning series The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, notably designing many characters including Din Djarin, Moff Gideon, Cara Dune, Greef Karga, Ahsoka Tano, Katan, Boba Fett, and Fennec Shand, and the list could go on. He's also contributed to the design of Galaxy's Edge theme park, the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser, and Kabam's Star Wars Uprising. And for a lot of you OG fans, you're going to be familiar with Brian's Star Wars work from that game. His clients in the entertainment and gaming industries include Warner Brothers, Paramount, Legendary, Disney, Wizards of the Coast, 2K Games, and Telltale Games. So without any further ado, guys, I'd like to bring Brian into the stream.
Hello.
Hey, Brian. May the 4th be with you.
Yes. Yeah. Happy May the 4th to everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I've been excited for this for some time now. So thank you for having me, Adam.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. I see you're rocking some cool Star Wars swag in the background.
Yeah, I think if we look at each other's little shrine in the background, it's pretty similar. I think we might put these helmets on.
Except
for the ending.
You have a Stormtrooper prop helmet that is a replica of a legacy or remnant stormtrooper that you designed, which is insane.
Right. Yeah.
How
RS
cool is
Prop
that?
Master sent me this.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then
I don't know. I mean, it's
what
such a cool little piece to have back there. Big piece, actually, compared to
yeah,
this.
and
Yeah.
so like I see Heavy Mando back there. What's it like having collectibles that you would probably just buy anyway, but they're collectibles that are of characters that you've designed? What does that feel like?
It's weirdly full circle, because when I went to college, I
Mhm.
was entertaining the idea of doing toy design or practical special effects, something involving sculpture or maquette sculpture. So when I started, my journey as a concept artist, that kind of took a significant backseat. And yeah, it never really clicked that this might actually happen at some point in my career. And it's the coolest thing, because I mean, I love toys, and my wife's like, you can have as many as you have a space for. So I'm gonna have to build something a little bit better than just this little
Yeah, we're
shelf
gonna need a
behind
bigger
me.
shelf. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. All right, so there's so much to get into today. But I think before we jump over that, I just want to let our viewers know we will be getting to questions that you guys have for Brian. We are using a third-party platform called Slido to source those questions. The unique thing about that is you follow the link that my colleague has dropped in the chat, enter your question, but you can also see everybody else's questions, and you can like other questions that you're like, oh yeah, I want that answered as well. And what that's going to do is it's automatically going to like order and source the questions according to the ones that the most people want answered. So it's not a popularity contest. It's just more efficient. And we'll be using that a little bit later on. So with that out of the way, I am going to get a little slideshow that we have prepared of a ton of fantastic images. We're going to be just looping this in the background. These are many, many concepts that you've done for the Star Wars IP. That will just kind of be looping through. This will be less of a like, now tell me about this piece and tell me about that piece. And we're just going to nerd out. We're going to talk about Star Wars. We're going to talk about art. We're going to talk about the artist's journey while we have this amazing backdrop.
This is the one day out of the year to do it, right?
Yeah, I had a colleague say to me today, "This is your Super Bowl, isn't it?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, this is my Super Bowl." So let me get that looping. We'll just jump past this splash screen, which I know that the images are somewhat chronologically arranged, and this is some of the earlier work in the beginning here that I know that you did with Lucasfilm. I think for Galaxy's Edge, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That was my first official project with them. So yeah, this is just
awesome.
Yeah, a few of those images.
Okay, so we'll jump right into the Star Wars conversation. And one of the things that I would love to hear about from you, that I'd like to hear from every friend of mine who's a fan, is what's your first memory of Star Wars? What was your first exposure that you can remember?
I was a toddler. I'm not kidding. I think I was introduced when I was maybe 2 or 3 years old. The first movie, like the cinematic movie that I remember, I was in a Circuit City and I was in a stroller. And I think I've said this in a podcast recently, actually, where my mom was shopping for TVs. So we're going through the TV section and Top Gun was on. And she was stopping where they were playing the film. And as she would roll by and I would go out of frame from the TV, I would start crying. And she was wondering what, and actually pushed back and then noticed I was fixated on the Tomcats. And then she introduced me to that movie, and I was absolutely obsessed from a barely, I could barely walk. I was very young. And
awesome.
And soon after, I remember, I think it was an advertisement for maybe THX, or maybe it was a home TV with a new, built-in sound system. And I remember seeing X-Wings, and I thought that is the coolest thing ever. And then I think my parents kind of made that connection and then introduced me to A New Hope. Absolutely fell in love. And then Empire Strikes Back, I remember the Wampa scene terrifying me.
Yeah.
I'd be hiding behind the couch whenever, he was about to get swiped off of the Tauntaun. But yeah, that is my earliest memory.
That's
And really it's just images.
that's some fantastic parenting right there.
Yeah.
Like they saw that you loved Star Wars and they started you out with A New Hope. And
Yeah, and
then
I
like
think
they
they're tuning
proceeded
into this.
chronologically.
So thank you
Yeah.
very much, Mom and Dad.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, really, all us fans do have them to thank for getting you into that, because we're enjoying your love for Star Wars now, and all the content that's coming out. So tell us a little bit about how you feel like Star Wars has influenced you as you continue to grow as an artist.
Oh, that's a big one. I mean,
Maybe just pick an
time
aspect.
do we
It's okay.
have?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I can go from there. Like,
Mm-hmm.
When I was, old enough to, really fall in love with the craft of drawing, I was drawing just things that I liked all the time. It was Star Wars, it was Ninja Turtles, it was a bunch of stuff, X-Men. I was really into comics. And then I got some of the Power of the Force figures. So this was around the time when the special edition of the 90s came out. That was my first theater experience with Star Wars. And it just blew me away. And yeah, I took the Power of the Force figures and I would get a disposable camera and, take photos with that camera. And always would think that it's going to be like just this like master shot. I'd be so excited going to Walgreens, getting developed, and then noticing it's just the top of a head of a figure or the back of a dewback or something like that.
It's pre-digital. Yeah.
Disappointed. Yeah. But it grew. It was always something that was very creative. And when I was young, like I would have friends that also like to draw, and we would have sleepover sketching parties. We'd always, trying to get my friends involved with the process of doing art. And it grew. It kept building off of itself. I went to a middle high school, so 6th through 12th grade. It was a magnet program in North Carolina. They offered visual arts classes, very specific to painting and drawing and ceramics. And then I had friends there where we had mutual interests, and we built off of our love for games and movies and Star Wars, and it just kept growing. And then it got to a point where I'm graduating high school, or I'm about to. And I think I knew even, pretty early on that I wanted to, do something with art, but it was still kind of ethereal and, kind of abstract how I could, just like fit into a industry as an artist. So like, I always thought it was animation at that point. Computer animation was getting, more and more popular, and it was becoming sort of mainstream. Like my parents started recognizing it as a viable, professional, career. So I entertained that, but really it was still the craft of image making, just 2D image making, that was still my main passion. And more so it was, like movies. It was always movies. Like Lord of the Rings was also a big influence for me, and the behind the scenes, those art books like really started broadening my sense of how someone who likes to draw and someone who likes Star Wars and film could actually get a career doing my passion and my hobbies since a young person. So it honestly just kept building and building and building. And it was always hard work and dedication and, just a love for the craft. But yeah, does that answer your question? Because I kind of
totally does. You just answered like
but...
5 of my questions.
Cool.
Absolutely. Because my next question was going to be like, how did you start to discern that like this could be a career path for you? And I love that you talked about the art of and like other films and the cinematic experience, because I think for those of us who didn't grow up in like all the saturation of stuff that we have now, we really have those art books to thank for showing us that this is a thing. Like there are people that have to make paintings and drawings of this stuff before it gets
And
produced.
this was before social media, and I really think that like young aspiring artists have a lot of opportunities connecting with professionals and more specialized education if they recognize that they love something and they want to pursue, you know, actually learning methods that could get them a career. It's really cool. Like, but for me, I didn't have that. It was really two people in particular that I knew that really helped open doors. One was my mom's friend, Julie Rapazzi, who she was living out in Silicon Valley. And when I was, I think, in late middle school, early high school, that's when she suggested visual effects. And then I got a visual effects, like ILM had these large anthologies, and I remember two of them. I had two of them. One I think was published in the late 90s, and then they did another, you know, like second edition for when they were doing more VFX. But I remember that first one was a big, you know, sort of aha moment for me of seeing like really in depth the craft that ILM, you know, did with the art of special effects and just the movie magic that I always wondered, how did they do that as a kid? And then that really sort of was like, okay, you know, there are people that are doing this for a living and are really good at it. I want to be even just a fraction as good as them.
Sure.
So then I went to college at Columbus College of Art and Design, and I then made a connection. Well, actually, no, I made a connection in high school with someone who worked at ILM. So in tandem with that book, I saw my mom saw in a newspaper that someone graduated from local high school, Kerry Phillips, and he was a software engineer for ILM. So he was making proprietary software that they were using for all of their VFX. And I decided to write him, and I think I sent him a CD at the time.
Yes.
Whatever art that I wanted to show him.
Yeah.
And he wrote me back. It was really cool. And then we started kind of doing like a pen pal thing.
Awesome.
And then he said, if you ever want to come visit, you know, if you're ever in California, come on out and I'll show you around, which was really cool. So we did, and I thought I was just going to get a tour of ILM, and we went there, and this was when it was Kerner Optical, very small, very secret. ILM was very secret this time.
This would have been roughly what year? Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, yeah. This was, I would say probably 2002.
Awesome.
2001, 2002.
Yeah.
Would be my guess. So we went there, and I thought I had the wrong address because it looked like I was going to go to an optometrist or something. And go inside, and then you instantly know, aha, okay, they had like a life-size Darth Vader, and you know, they're cool, you know, high-tech lighting. And he comes out and he's like, oh, I'm not going to show you around here. I'm going to take you somewhere else. And we ended up taking a road trip, you know, maybe 10 or 15 miles slightly north to Skywalker Ranch.
No.
And, and that was a complete surprise because we were going up Lucas Valley, and it's so beautiful. You go up, you know, these really nice hilly roads. As a car guy, I mean, it's like such an awesome driving road just to get up there. But it was magical because at the time I didn't realize this until later, that when we pulled up, George Lucas was out on the front lawn with his art department. And I think it was promotional photography that they were doing for Attack of the Clones at the time. So I think this was before Attack of the Clones came out. But I didn't make those connections until later. So, I mean, just going by, seeing the people, and then it's like, I think that was Ian McKay. I think that was Dermot Power, you know, among them. Like, it was really cool. And that's where I bought the episode 1 art of. So that was the first art of book that I bought with my own money. And this was in high school. And that was a big moment for sure.
Oh, you must have been sitting in that car, like coming on that that property just like best day ever,
Oh, for
100%.
sure.
Best day
Yeah.
ever.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
so talking about the art books, just a really quick aside, like now you're a very prominent feature in the art of the Mandalorian season 1, Mandalorian season 2, and we're going to see more of your work as these art books roll out. What is it like? And I hope you know that there are a lot of younger artists out there that I know that I'm working with, whether that's through Gnomon and whatnot, who are really inspired by your work, looking at those books, saying, this is what I want to do. What is it like to be in that position now?
It's cool. It's cool, but it's also, like you have a sense of I have a sense of responsibility now with my image making that I've never had before in my career. And sometimes I have to suppress those feelings down so I can actually do a good job and I don't get locked up and the weight of, what it could be. Because with those art books, and as I go, with working on Star Wars, it's been evident for a while that the images that I make could and will be probably seen in some capacity, even if they're not final designs
Yeah.
for the projects. And that's what makes Star Wars so cool, is that even designs that haven't been used could be used in the future. We've seen it before on past projects. We see it in the Clone Wars and in Rebels, like some of Ian McKeag's unused designs. Like I think for Darth Maul, some of his early designs became the Dathomir witch aesthetic, and that's pretty commonplace. And I've always thought that that's the coolest thing in the world. So it's like kind of there's a dichotomy there, I think, of it's the coolest thing, and it's also, it can be terrifying, right? Like,
Totally. Yeah.
That's why I think I really like to not turn in crap because of that. I really like to turn in designs that I would be proud of, or it's like I have this thing where it's like the toy, it's like the checklist of, is it successful or not? Do I want a toy of it? And if you check that box, then or even just, like, maybe, sure. If I, had some room on my shelf, then yeah, that's one of the criteria for whether or not I'm ready to go to bed sometimes.
Well, I think it's a really interesting thing you're bringing up that most people probably aren't thinking about is, a lot of people are familiar with that idea of like, when you sit down to sketch something and to create and ideate, if you're overlaying that with, but this is also needs to be something cool for my Instagram feed, that can be very counterproductive, right? Like that shouldn't be the filter through which you approach your pure creativity. But that's a whole different level of pressure to be like, hey, whatever I'm making right now could wind up in a book, could be, could be seen. Is that something that because you talked about earlier about you have to kind of suppress those feelings, get those out of the way so that you can do what you're really there to do. Can you tell us a little bit more about, that experience? Is it like more like a performance pressure, or is it just you want to do justice to this universe that your art's going to exist in, or what's it like for you?
Definitely those. I think definitely both of those things in different capacities depending on what I'm doing. But I will say, to like kind of preface that, that's not so common in a career being a concept artist, because one of the things that does give a concept artist power is, you generally get to choose what you get to show when it's approved, when you're approved to show it. And it's generally after or well after a project is released. And then you could show the work that you would like to show for it. And if something's, translated in a way that you like, you can take some ownership on that. And if it isn't, then you can choose not to.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of freedom there. But yeah, that's why this is a bit different, because, like with with that love for the franchise and wanting to do right by it, especially, when it comes to the Mandalorian, and when Jon Favreau was very adamant about it feeling like the OG original trilogy. That's my childhood, and
Right.
I've, that getting that opportunity to give a little bit of what feels right, but also taking it and evolving it and giving a little bit of yourself and where it could go from there, has been an amazing experience, and not something that I have been afforded until now. And working with awesome people like Shauna Terpsick, the costume designer, Doug Chang, who's my boss, who I've looked up to since really, Skywalker Ranch, way
Yeah.
back when I was in high school, getting that Art of Episode 1, seeing his work in there and being so impressed by his marker sketches
Yeah.
of vehicles, and being like, I feel like he made me feel like I could do that. And then I tried, I'm like, oh, I
Yeah.
can't do that.
You didn't stop. And I think
Right. Yeah.
that's like, the analogy I always use is I'm also a musician. I'll hang out with friends, and sometimes you'll see an amazing guitar player playing and they'll be like, that's it, I'm hanging up my guitar. But I'm the one that goes the other way. I'm like, I can't wait to get home and play. I know it's not going to be as good, but like, I can't wait to like climb that mountain and try to get there. And I think,
That's it though.
yeah,
That is it right there for I think that's the most important thing, full circle now
sure.
for a young artist. You need to be inspired. You need to feel like like the core of your being, that's what you want to do, because you love it. You love it. Even if you're not where you want to be, that doesn't matter. It's that spark inside of you that you really need to retain, because like when you work professionally, that's very important to keep. There's the running sort of stereotype with industry artists becoming jaded, right? And
Oh yeah.
and it can happen, but I think really that passion inside of you and having hobbies is so important, because I'm such an advocate for hobbies as a professional artist, because you need to feel fulfilled in different capacities of life, and everything will then feed you creatively in the
Yeah.
end and keep you fueled, and that's so important.
Yeah. What are some of those other hobbies for you, if I can ask?
Yeah, so it's funny, like, because we're talking about sculpture, and
Mhm.
sculpture would be something that I do try and work into professionally, but I don't get too many opportunities to. And because I have so many other hobbies that are not art related that kind of supersede sculpting, or any like art as a professional or not professional, like a selfish, just personal art capacity, right? I don't do that too often, actually. So I really love climbing. Snowboarding season's over with. I tried to do that as much as I could. I love car culture, classic cars, which is also design.
Yeah.
So just being enamored with just the design of, so, particularly the late '60s, mid to late '60s era of automobile
Okay. Yeah.
design is just
Yeah.
so visually rich for me. But yeah, I have so many other things, that like hiking with my wife and my dog, just having things to decompress, having things that fulfill you creatively, and then also things that are a bit physical. Like climbing to me is like Tetris for your body. You have to
Mm.
figure out the puzzle and the problem solving of different routes, and I love that, because then it keeps me physically fit, because when we work for many hours out of the day, and I've done this just sitting, like you can definitely let your physicality can be let go of,
Sure.
and it's really important to keep do some strength training of some sort, with the lifestyle of being sedentary for your for your art. So yeah, that's a few of them. I know I have more, but
that's awesome, and I couldn't agree more. I think that you find other things that you love that are seemingly not related to your art at all as a discipline, and it will come back to you. It will come back into your art. It's so funny how that works.
Yeah.
So, and I thank you so much for the vulnerability and talking about that pressure, right? Of like, hey, you know, I get to make Star Wars stuff, and then it's like, oh man, I get to make Star Wars stuff. Because one of the running themes that this May the Fourth special falls inside is this artist journey series, where kind of the main emphasis of that series is to talk to artists that a lot of people would look at and be like, oh well, you know, they do what they do because they're touched by the gods, and they you know, they walk 10 feet above the rest of us, and they're special, and I can never attain that, and they've arrived and everything's just great. But this, you know, this idea of like, artists are the kinds of people that I know, just they want to humanize themselves, you know, like people who are quote unquote at the top of their game still struggle with imposter syndrome, still struggle with self-doubt and having to overcome things. So I think what you shared is a great example of that. You know,
but we can
because
expand on that too if you want.
yeah,
Like,
whatever you want to say in that regard.
Like
the question was
when
like, how do you
arrived, right?
Yeah.
Like with young artists thinking like, you know, it's a mountaintop, you know, like you have a goal and then you get on that mountaintop. It's like you don't want to plateau either. Like I think one of the things about just being creative is like I think we all strive to problem solve and to be challenged, and and we hate being bored. At least I hate being bored. In my childhood, I had to, like, I mean, I didn't have a lot of toys. I had toys, but I got a lot of fulfillment out of being creative and creating things from very little. And I think that comes from not liking to be bored. And and when if young artists think like, oh, you've arrived, you got the job that you've always wanted, and everything just clicks, that's not the case. I hate to tell you, but like it's always challenging, and that should be embraced. Being challenged, being frustrated, you should embrace it. And not in, you know, not in the sense that if you're struggling on a piece, you're like, oh, I just love the pain, you know, like I don't mean that in a like a masochistic sort of way. I mean, you have to just acknowledge, and there needs to be a bit of acceptance that things will be hard. You might have a hard time with certain assignments, or some things just don't click as an artist that does it day to day. Some days are better than others. Sometimes it just clicks and you can get something done in a few hours, and sometimes it doesn't and it takes a few days. That's like being kind to yourself, understanding you're human, you're not a robot, and you're not like some sort of, you know, like person on the mountaintop fighting off, you know, like all the assignments as they're coming up the hills at you. You know, it doesn't need to be that way, is what I'm trying to say, right? Yeah.
So I think that opens up another direction I wanted to go in, and that is because I couldn't agree more. I've known people that they made the quote unquote mountaintop the goal, like the arrival point, and then the most dangerous thing if you do that is if you achieve it, because then it's like, oh, now what do I do with my life? And I've known people, professionals, that's happened to them, and it can be very destructive. So
like, where do you evolve from there, right?
Yeah, precisely. And you know, you talk about not wanting to be bored. That's got to be the most boring thing ever, to like feel like you're not growing. So what, whether you want to talk about Star Wars or not, for you as an artist, like what's the mountain that you're climbing, right? Because we're only seeing, hey, you're working on doing this amazing art for Star Wars, and you're on this beautiful mountain peak, you know, making this rad stuff. But I know that you're not just camping there as an artist. Where do you want to push yourself?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a question that I wish I was asked more often, because it can evolve, right? The evolution of your craft or where you want to be creatively can change. It can change dramatically, actually. Like it's the amount of hours to become to become a master. And I've heard fluctuation, but it's a lot of time and dedication. Like I think a lot of people say around 10 years of solid dedication, you can become a master. But if you think about, and I think actually I'm kind of parroting probably someone that you've interviewed before, because I have heard this and it's resonated with me, is 10 years is a fraction out of your life. What if you then chose another craft to master? And then by the time you are of age, of a senior age, you have multiple masteries. I find that very intriguing. And that's not to say that I'm going to quit and then become a professional rock climber or something else. but there can be an evolution so that you don't get bored. And for me, like where I have been within working in the sandbox of Star Wars is I think a lot of people think it gets easier because you're just so acclimated to it. You've spent time within the universe that you feel like you're almost, it's ingrained in you, that you feel like you're a resident of that galaxy. And in some ways that's true. Some things do become easier, but I think what the challenge is, especially when you have assignments that are archetypically very similar to other things that you've done in the past, it's very easy to resort to things that you've already done, or things that you just like your own tastes can be limiting. So the challenge is to constantly, when I was speaking on fuel, constantly keeping that fuel going and keeping your inspiration vast. Like learning new things is really the main thing, right? Like that is the thing. Always learn new things, because you never want to, burn out and stall on a plateau when you feel like you're okay being there. This is funny segue, but I worked at a company called Image Movers Digital. It was a Disney performance capture movie company. It was my first job when I moved out to California. And it was also under Doug Chang, funny enough. Wow. Yeah. And Doug hired Eric Tiemens, who I'm working with now in the art department. Amazing environmental concept artist, painter. He's a plein air. Like plein air is you go on location and you paint. He does these beautiful acrylic, gouache, watercolor. Fantastic artist, and very expressive. Like very expressive strokes, and he just allows things to just be abstract with his personal art, and then even some of the stuff he did when he worked on the prequels. So we were really excited when he, was coming into Image Movers Digital, and then we were shocked and amazed that he chose not to continue with that work when he was there. He learned Cinema 4D, which is a 3D program. And he started doing more 3D, like solid designed images and keyframes. And I had a friend that asked him, well, what made you choose to go down this path? And I'm going to paraphrase horribly, but he said something along the lines of, well, I wanted to learn a new medium and a new software, and this is what I chose to do, because I don't want to get bored and I don't want to resort to old tricks with how I choose that tool set, essentially. And that really kind of clicked for me when I was starting in my career. Like that sounds like that's the philosophy to adhere to, is constantly learn and don't let yourself just be kind of pigeonholed or be remembered for something that then a lot of space builds up in between. Like you're remembered for something you did 10 years later. It's like, I feel like I haven't progressed, the feelings of progression, or I feel like I haven't pushed things or tried new things. So when it comes to that evolution, where I would like to go, I just love everything. Like I love the cosplay. I love the construction of costuming. I love the armor departments and the painters of the armor departments. I love all of these different capacities that are working together collaboratively with what I'm doing. I would love to interact more in those departments, or even be humbled enough to, just sit and learn or help paint a doorknob. I wouldn't care. Like I just would love to be more involved in the fabrication of those things. In even just some small sense, but yeah, like I think expanding upon, the creative process and capacities that you're not good at is something that I like, like having hobbies where you want to try something that you have no knowledge in, and you're a complete novice when you start, but then you build. It's a new learning process, it's a new building, and then you can surprise yourself, and no one else needs to know. When it's a hobby anyways, no one else needs to know. You're learning, and it's keeping that fuel going. Like all of those things, like professionally, I would like that. In my hobbies, I would like that. And that's what continues that freshness that you want to, hold on to with your designs.
I think that's so good, because I think when we do like go back to the beginning of something that we have no knowledge of again, it gets you back into that childlike space. It gets you back into a space of like learning how you learn. I believe that doing that influences the way that you're already doing stuff, because you develop a different perception on how to grow and how to learn and how to develop yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
They say like we change every 7 years. Like our biology actually, there's a biological change that happens roughly around that amount of time. So that's also why it's important, because we're also changing.
Totally. And I love the story about Eric Tiemens. I did not know that. I think that's amazing. I love that you have a plein air painter who's like, I'm going to do 3D now. Because I just, a little bit like selfishly for me, one of the things that the conversations that I have a lot working with Gnomon as like an outreach specialist is this divide between traditional art and 3D. It's like 3D is completely different thing, and then you have all these opinions about it, and it's like, well, this is over here and that's over there. But he was just like, no, this is another medium. It's just a different medium. And I think when you approach something new like that way, it allows you to keep building on your artistic foundations. So I'm sure that he took the knowledge that he knew as a plein air painter of composition and light and color and all of those things, and just said, how do I achieve that in this different medium? The reason why I'm kind of grinding an axe on that is because I think in the conversation about achieving the mountaintop, wanting things to be easy, wanting to get to a place where things feel easy, a lot of people treat certain mediums as like, well, maybe this will be a shortcut for me. Maybe this will just help me get there faster. But at the end of the day,
sometimes like I do
in a practical
recycle way, like sometimes you can do things that make your day-to-day easier when it's appropriate. But like for me, like I recently, there's an artist that I really like, Rob Bliss, and when it's people that you admire as a professional and you hearing from them that it's always difficult and there's always struggles with them when you look at their work and are like, that just looks so effortless. Like and it just looks like it's easy for them, and they're communicating that, well, that's also not the case. It's the illusion of effortlessness.
But that's what I think that's the curse of mastery. A master always makes it look easy, but they're on the inside, they're working really hard doing what they're doing. I wanted to ask you, I mean, I know today's all about Star Wars, but I wanted to ask you, because I think in the public eye, you're mainly known for what you're contributing to the Star Wars universe. Are there other mediums or IPs or genres that you really like to work in as well? Like, so, unrelated things.
Yeah, I mentioned sculpture. I do try and bring that into some of my work. It honestly makes some design choices easier. Like when it comes to helmets or even alien heads, like I'll sculpt it. I'll take photos with a phone, and then that's enough for me to build off of.
Yeah.
In Photoshop. But yeah, genres, I don't know. I mean, like even with Star Wars, my reference is predominantly historical. Like I will look at a lot of historical armor and clothing, and I think when it comes to other genres, like I love fantasy if it's grounded in some sort of historical understanding. So I've worked on D&D, and actually, funny enough, there's a company that is doing these statues, these D&D statues, and they released one recently of one of my concepts for Caddy Bree, and I thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
I really like the fantasy genre. Like I've mentioned, I was very inspired by Lord of the Rings as a young creative, yeah, and I've worked on some games. I was on an R&D. I was in an R&D department for Kabam, and we tried lots of different types of games, and none of them really stuck. But we tried like a Viking game and like a rock and roll kind of game, and even with Telltale, like some of the story games that they have and the style that that they had. I like doing things a little more stylized, sometimes, and even just exploring things that, break up the monotony is a good thing. But yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty open, like to other things. Like I think, it's just a different challenge. If it's a different genre, like I think the challenge now for me, because I've done Star Wars so much, is kind of washing off that aesthetic when you're working in different, in different genres. If I take freelance and it's, something, even if it's something similar to Star Wars, but they don't want it to, look related in
that's got to be really hard.
Yeah. I've had that happen. It's been a few years ago now, but I did some freelance, and I was having a hard time washing off that that aesthetic. But then it finally clicked. There is like there is a period, sometimes it takes a little longer than you would like, but there is a period where you're like, okay, I'm starting to settle in now.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, I don't know. I like a lot of stuff.
I love that attitude of like, I don't know. I mean, just give me a cool problem to solve. I'll nerd out on that.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think that's a concept artist through and through.
Design is design, right? Like
absolutely.
Yeah.
Before we transition into getting into those questions that have been coming in from our audience, so bear with us, guys. We're almost to you. I wanted to just throw out a few popcorn questions really quickly. So these are probably like shorter answers, shorter format. But I thought it would be fun to ask you, is there anything that you haven't designed for Star Wars yet that you would be like, I really hope I get to design this, or something along these lines?
Wow. I can't, nothing specific. Like I don't, it's, for me, it's not, I want to redesign an existing character. For me, I want to encourage the expansion of the universe into new territory, maybe a new time period. The new of the universe is what I want to continue to do.
I like that.
Because I think that's the most exciting for a designer, is where can we push it? Like I would like to go way back down the timeline into the past. Like prehistoric Star Wars. How cool would that be?
Those proto lightsabers made from crystals, that kind of stones. Okay, let's do it. Call up Doug Chang. Tell him that's what's happening next. Awesome. So if you could, I know that it looks like, I think I see some Hot Toys back there. If you could have a Hot Toys Star Wars figure of a character that you've designed that you don't have yet, what would one of your first choices be?
Is this an existing or
Yeah,
non-existing?
no, an existing. Like you design this character, Hot Toys has made it. It's out
Oh, they
there.
made it. Okay.
Yeah, like it exists. You'd love to have it.
Fennec. Fennec
Yeah,
Shand.
cool.
Yeah, I thought they did an amazing job. And the head sculpt, everything is just like they did such. I can't wait to see that in person. I would
Oh yeah.
hardcore like that one. Yeah.
I think Fennec is a great example of a new character, relatively new, that she pushes into a new area, but feels 100% Star Wars. It's like it's a type of outfit and style that you haven't seen in Star Wars yet, but it's like it feels like it belongs in that universe.
That's one of the few designs that I did where I don't even know if they knew how big of a character she would become because at least for me it seemed like it was specific to that one episode and then maybe that was it, right?
Yeah.
But I think like Filoni really liked that design and he really liked working with Ming-Na Wen and really made her become a much bigger character, which I've been very happy with because that design, I think like I think I got that assignment on a Thursday and I turned everything in at the end of the day, Friday, and it was approved that Monday.
Mm-hmm.
So like I would have loved to do more art of her, but yeah, really, I think I have I don't know if it's in the slideshow, but I have like 3 images of her.
She's in
and
there.
That's
Yeah.
and maybe one helmet variation, and
Yeah.
that's it. Like
And her helmet was the first thing I noticed. The silhouette of the helmet and the shape of the visor, it was so it's like it reminded me instantly of almost like that medieval knight helmet kind of feel where the bottom
right.
comes out further than the top.
Yeah, it's the
Again,
Italian style. Yeah.
yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Really
I was
cool.
definitely influenced by that. And it was funny because like I think I always intended there to be a visor in there. I never thought, and it makes so much sense now that I see how they've translated it, where the tech, the greebly bits, like on her earmuff area, the earmuff area of the helmet, looks like it could be a perfect hinge for
Yeah.
that, so you could see
Yeah.
out of it. And I'm like, that's an interesting. That's a funny thing where when you design something, sometimes things get translated in a way that you didn't see, and then
Yeah.
you see it differently after that. It changes
Totally.
your perception of what you even have worked on.
But yeah,
And that's a cool example of that.
totally. Darth Maul's horns were originally feathers when Ian
Yes,
McKeag first
that's
designed
another
him.
great
You know,
example.
it's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, if you don't mind me saying so, just as long as we're on the topic of you designing a character, because I've followed your Star Wars themed work since the stuff that was made public from Star Wars Uprising, and I remember the first time I came across it, I was like, here's something that feels different. Like it doesn't look like other Star Wars concept art that's been made, but it feels 100% in universe. Like it just sits there. And I think, I've got a lot of friends that like your work too. And I think that's one of the things I hear come up a lot is like, here's the person who 100% gets it, but is giving us something. We feel like we're seeing something new. And I think, in fact, what's on the screen right now is a great example. Where you've taken the Mandalorian design into other areas and kind of created what is the modern Mandalorian look. I think number one, I am thinking that was probably very iterative and very difficult, but it's like it's there, and it's
it
really
wasn't
cool.
as difficult. Like it's funny. When it came to the Mandalorian aesthetic, I felt like like Ralph McQuarrie and Joe Johnston already had such a distinct, iconic shape language for the cultural armor aesthetic
Mhm.
that for me, who I think like, I love shape language, very clean reads, like silhouette's so important. And I'm also quite geometric. So everything kind of like, and just being so influenced by Boba Fett from a very early
Oh
age,
yeah.
it just that felt pretty effortless. Like there's a lot
That's
of
cool.
stuff in season 1, in particular, The Mandalorian, that just kind of clicked so easily, and not much iteration either, which was really interesting. And when they gave me the assignments of just design a bunch of Mandalorians and populate their covert and some of the flashback sequences, like that just like was like, okay, great, cool. How much time
Awesome.
can I have?
You're a kid again. Well, and
Yeah.
I remember seeing, I mean, you did some really early before working on the Mandalorian. You have artwork that is variations on Mando looks and stuff like that, and kind of pushing those boundaries. I think what you've done with Heavy Mando with Paz Vizsla is a great example of, here's an entirely new, almost shape language to the beveling and the construction of the helmet. It's a lot more tactical and hard surface, but hasn't left that Star Wars. Here he is on the screen again. It doesn't leave the Star Wars aesthetic. And I think, for me anyway, if I had to put my finger on it, it's like that just resonates. It's awesome. But okay, we're going to get ready to take questions from the chat. Something I like to talk to all of our guests about, and I know that you're already familiar with Gnomon, and this is a Gnomon live stream. I was just curious to know what has your, like, how have you connected with Gnomon? What do you like about it?
So when I was in college, I knew about the Gnomon Workshop.
Mm-hmm.
So through their DVDs, I had Ian McKaig's visual storytelling.
Oh yeah,
reinterpreting Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid, and I learned ZBrush, which is now a very dull tool to me, so I need to get back into it. But I learned through Ben Morrow's Gnomon DVDs as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the accredited school, which is separate from that. Sounds like that's an amazing opportunity for young artists, being taught by industry professionals and having education that's so tailor-made to what they would like to do as a career. Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
And through you, actually, Adam, that's how I've learned a lot more about Gnomon when their more recent developments, since I'm now not a student but a professional. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think what I wanted to ask you this, and you can say whatever you want in response to it. You can even say, like, I don't know what I would do. Let's rewind. Let's go back in time. We're going to go back to young Brian, the young moisture farmer, staring up at the twin suns, making art, going like, someday I want to work in this industry. But knowing what you know about the present day industry, and if there were a school like Gnomon around at that, or kind of was still very new, but like in this environment for entertainment design and the stuff that Gnomon's teaching, built on traditional art skills, what kind of opportunities do you feel like that would have presented to you as a younger artist? And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. This isn't a setup. I'm just curious to know, going back, looking at things and seeing kind of the array of tools that are out there, how might that have influenced you?
Man, I think it would have just like kind of been like a rocket strapped to my back a little bit more than the slow, methodical way of escalation into a career. I think it would have been more like, just getting jettisoned up into the stratosphere in a lot of ways, because the tools that young artists have now are just a lot more specific, refined, and readily available than what I had. And you said moisture farmer. I did have a farm in my backyard. Not really. It was on the other side of the fence. So that resonates with me quite a bit.
Excellent.
But yeah, like, I just had like, I think like conceptart.org and the DVDs that Gnomon Workshop had, but a very specific education, man, that like I actually was dependent on my circle of friends, even in college. When I went to CCAD, there I was an illustration major, and at that time it was still very like editorial. So
Yes.
the dean of illustration was an editorial illustrator. He did the backs of Reader's Digest magazines, Time magazine covers. So there was definitely a sensibility that if you're an illustration major, you're going to be doing that.
Right.
And there was a bit of fighting that we had to do the digital fantasy sci-fi art and to make a
Right.
case for it.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a little more fighting and it was a little longer to achieve. Whereas if I was a student now, if I was a young high school student now, and I had an opportunity like Gnomon as a school to go to, I would have probably been adamant with my parents to go there, to be
Oh,
honest.
okay.
Because like
Yeah.
just looking at that reel that you had at the beginning of this live stream, it's like, oh my God, if I had that when I was a kid, it's like that's just a super inspiring body of work that you have there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, yeah, and thank you. And I know that you know, being an artist yourself, how hard they've worked on that. But yeah, I mean, thank you. I always find it's interesting to talk to primarily 2D artists about those disciplines, because my takeaway from what you're saying and some of the examples that you've brought up is just the idea of use whatever tools at your disposal. You know, like you're making an image, whatever medium you want to use to make that image. And I agree. I think right now the tools are so democratized and they're so interchangeable that it's not like, well, do you want to be a 3D artist or a 2D artist? It's just like, just go make art. And I would love to see what you would come up with in ZBrush based on some of the drawings that you're doing, man. That would be amazing. Okay. Let's go straight over to the questions beginning, because I think that the
Sounds
natives
good.
are
Yeah, let's do
probably
it.
getting restless. And I don't know. I might get some hate mail if I don't do this right away. So let me just, I'm
Yeah,
going to
let's give
turn
them a
off this.
solid half hour.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'll use as much time as you're willing to take. It's a soft close, but I want to be respectful of your time as well.
How
Let's
about
see
this?
here.
Let's do 30 minutes starting at the first question.
Oh,
And I'll try and
awesome.
be
Thank you,
efficient
Brian.
with my answers so we
That's
can get as
great,
many
man.
as we
Thank
can.
you. Yeah. Okay. I got the, I'm just doing a little bit of juggling here. Let me turn that off. Let's pull this up. All right. Here we go. All right, cool. We've got a nice queue of questions ready to go here. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in. Starting now. What kind of art studies would you recommend to do for aspiring artists, specifically for anatomy and color theory?
Anatomy and color theory. Oh my goodness. So anatomy, the Bridgman books are really good. Even if like Bridgman has a very like specific way that he draws anatomy, and that can be independent from what he's teaching with anatomy. Because I feel like he has a very efficient way of you understanding the mechanics of like how everything works with fingers, with posture, and just how like the rib cage and the more rigid forms on the human figure react with the softer areas, like with the abdomen, the rolling of the rib cage, the spine, how the spine where the neck meets the shoulders of the spine, and how you stand, there is a balance with where you put the heel if it's contrapposto, or if you're standing more rigid with legs spread apart, you're more symmetrical. He does a good job explaining that in a way that you can understand and you can use and utilize in a professional capacity when you don't have a live model, because that's the other thing, just always learning and doing the figure drawing classes. And when it comes to color theory and light, there's so many different books as well, like as far as like how to design light, how to use light in a black and white sense. Actually, Framed Ink series, there's two volumes of Framed Ink, and it's from a storyboard, an actual storyboard professional artist, and great. It's a great utility for using that to compose your images for story. to get your eye to rest where you want it to. And then, there's like just like looking at Sargent paintings or Rembrandt paintings, and there's like so much you can learn within, these master artists, that you can always learn something new. And then there's artists that you can learn multiple different aspects of image making, like Frazetta. Like Frazetta, you can learn pretty much everything you need to know about design, composition, anatomy, light, color theory, like so many different things from just Frazetta. But answers your question.
That was pretty comprehensive.
I could go for an hour actually on just that.
And I'm sure everybody out there is like, yes, please do. And they've got their notebooks out. Teach us, Brian. Okay. Next question is, what is your process in designing characters? Specifically, they're asking with regards to reference. They want to know if you use any 3D in your process.
So my day-to-day is I will get the assignment. I will ask questions. I'll sometimes look at the script, see the context, and then I'll give a little time to like kind of process it and be like, okay, kind of try and make a game plan with reference building. And I will build reference in different capacities. There's like a historical reference, there's clothing reference, there's like attitude reference with like posture and pose. Sometimes I'll recycle old art that I've done if it's like a significant time constraints that I have to work within. If you have a library of art that you've already done, especially with characters, and there's an attitude that you can build off of, sometimes I will strip the design of a character down to its essentials of anatomy and pose and the attitude that I want, and build off of there. And you'd be surprised that you won't see the recycling sometimes. Sometimes I think it's very evident where I can definitely see that I've recycled. But yeah, like the reference, also like finding things that are unexpected, like the unexpected reference. Here's a good example. I was walking through the neighborhood, and there was a house that was throwing out some stuff. And one, I think, was maybe a grill. I'm not really sure what it was, but it looked like a droid. It was a round head, yes, and it had like what looked like multiple eyes on it. It was a beautiful brass sheen. And I took photos of that. And even though I haven't used that reference yet, I know that might come up in the future, just like building a library of things that you're inspired by with the world around you, and an interesting, unique, looking at things in a unique way, like the telephone poles in our neighborhood, and the and like the cables. They have like these like housing, these plastic housing that look just like the Millennium Falcon, like a tennis racket. And
wow,
just looking up, and it looks like the Millennium Falcon's right over your head. You just wonder, and you think about how the masters of the original trilogy were inspired like that, with the AT-ATs and the East Bay, with the cranes, and in Oakland there's street lamps, and the housing of the street lamps are the inspiration for Boba Fett's Slave One ship. So thinking about it in that capacity. But then when it comes to actually painting, I sometimes work black and white. Sometimes it's direct color when I know exactly what my palette's going to be. And I'm focusing on silhouette. I'm focusing on the shape, because really I think what makes something iconic is if you can put your character on a hill or somewhere in the distance, if you can recognize who that is, or if you can put that character next to a similar character, if they can stand on their own 2 feet, that's also successful. And then build up color, build up the texture, the line, all of that comes later. And in that process, sometimes I do seldomly do pencil, marker. I do like traditional analog media. It's very rare. It's mostly all Photoshop. And then sometimes sculpture. So I'm like using sculpture with monster clay. So traditional little little sculpts with BBs for eyes. Yeah. And then taking photos of that and painting over it in Photoshop. And sometimes it's photo texture. Sometimes if it's an actor that they want and generally this happens like we want to present this to the actor in a few hours or the next day when they're giving me the assignment in the mid-afternoon the day before. You know, I will Drew Struzan take a photo of that character and paint over it in Photoshop, like just like dither it, paint over it, you know, get all of the, you know, the facial features right where they need to be. It's not my interpretation of the actor. I feel like it's not my job to give them my interpretation
Right.
of what they look like. It should just look like them where they're like, that's awesome. I want to be that character. That's
they don't want you to be a caricature artist of the actor.
Yeah. And honestly, it would take me a lot more time, like a lot more time, because like when it comes to like portrait painting from scratch, I think I'm significantly slower than if I do it that way. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for the very generous answer. And there's probably going to be an entire subreddit now about the grill droid that we're eventually going to see in one of the upcoming Star Wars shows.
Well, if it happens, I will definitely make sure to post this side by side on Instagram or whatever.
And we actually did have some of your traditional sketches in the slideshow relative to some of the digital products, the final. So I loved when I saw that you shared that on Instagram, because it's really cool to see the similarities and the differences in those mediums. I think there's a lot to learn. All right. So this is a little bit, you kind of addressed some of these things for the question that's coming up, but if there's anything you want to add, they want to know, what is your typical concept pipeline? Do you like using line or tonal block in? Do you push for a quick finish or create lots of options first?
So I answered quite a bit of that in the previous question, but like, definitely focus on shape. Line is tertiary. Line and texture are kind of tertiary, because I think like at least with Star Wars, like noise is very subdued in design. Unless it's like you know, ships and droids, you can get pretty dinged up and, you know, high contrast with the paint chips and stuff. But, you know, for the most part, it's pretty low noise. So yeah, I think is that about as much as I haven't already said? Yeah, because
I think so. Yeah, add that to your previous answer. I think we've got it. Next question is, let's see. How did you end up? This is a big question, so choose what you want to unpack. But how did you end up at Lucasfilm, and how tough has the journey been?
All right, say that one more time.
How did you end up at Lucasfilm, and how tough has the journey been?
Oh goodness. Well, okay, so yeah, I can kind of go back to when I was graduating college, because through Carey Phillips, the software engineer, I kept in touch with him throughout college. And when it came to graduating, I had a pretty eclectic portfolio. So I had work that was kind of, you know, centered for gaming. I had work for, you know, the VFX industry, ILM, you know, to try and court ILM. And I had maquette sculpts and things for toy design. And I ended up getting like a few opportunities through like Activision's Raven Software and Hasbro and McFarlane Toys for like for toy design. And then out here in California, I had an opportunity to be a production assistant for ILM, which is a foot in the door, you know, sort of, you know, like kind of a Swiss Army knife for the art department. It would be little art, if any, and mostly like art department needs, if that makes sense. And there was a new company, and that was Image Movers Digital, which I ultimately chose. And that was through Doug Chang. And there were other artists that worked there that I admired, like Dermot Power, who worked on episode 2 and who gave me a lot of tools for my professional practice, you know, transitioning from like what I was doing in my practices in college to, you know, more efficient methods of working and looking at things, and, you know, higher level design philosophy. Dermot really helped a lot with those things. So I ended up going there, and then didn't ultimately choose ILM, which was kind of the thing that I thought I really wanted to do. for years. And then I ended up going with the more risky option as a production assistant as well for Image Movers. And this is, just a little over minimum wage. And California was, expensive then. I don't know how I would have even been able to do it now with just inflation. But yeah, ended up going there and learning from people that did work on Star Wars, but I wasn't working in that capacity. And then when Image Movers closed, I then had an opportunity to work for Lucasfilm Animation. And that was on what was called Primrose at the time, which was Strange Magic. But I ended up not getting in. So that door felt like just that door shut. And whenever a door shuts as an artist, don't get discouraged. It's not permanent, and doors have shut like a lot of times for me before, I ended up, getting into, Lucasfilm now. Like it happened again. I was at Kabam and Disney bought Star Wars, and there was fervor among artists like, oh my God, I want to work on Star Wars. Like this is going to mean some new opportunities. And Ian McKay got in through Doug Chang with the Lucasfilm Art Department, and I sent some work and it was rejected as well, as it wasn't realistic enough. And what that meant, as I parsed through it, was that I had more to learn. Because when I was working in gaming, when it comes to character design, there isn't the appropriateness for gaming versus the appropriateness for live action. There is a difference, especially when it comes to the actors and how the clothing will react to the actors, the height of the actors, like being considerate and taking all of those, challenges and being considerate of those to make a good design. Like, and here's an example, like Giancarlo Esposito, he's 5'7", and yet I've always thought he was over 6 foot in Breaking Bad. He has such a larger than life presence. But for the Mandalorian, when he's going to be standing next to Death Troopers that are, 6'5", how do you give him a presence that makes him stack up? And that was challenging. So there was very specific decisions and choices with the cape and that silhouette. But I'm getting off track now. The point is,
but it's all awesome.
There's a lot of opportunities that were not met through my journey. And the journey isn't the destination, it's the journey as an artist. Yeah. And you should take things you learn in different ways, in different aspects of entertainment, and through your failures and learning from them and growing. And it's like you're forging a sword. There is an art to folding that steel over and over and over again. And the more you fold it, the stronger the blade is. And it's a very similar philosophy that I have with just the journey as a professional artist.
Yeah.
Like I've had a lot of doors closed and it didn't matter ultimately because I learned from.
I love that what you said about like, hey, if a door closes, it's not the end of the world. That's because there's so much scarcity thinking out there. Like people are like, I gotta find the first job available to me. I gotta get out there. I gotta make this work because there's so few jobs. But it's just not true. It's not the reality.
Right.
And that I also love the statement of like, hey, that door closed and I took that to mean I have more to learn. Which is different.
Exactly.
I guess I just shouldn't do this.
Yeah, just don't get discouraged. I think that would be my biggest advice there. Like it's just learn, keep growing, and keep moving forward. And when an opportunity presents itself, even the ones that you don't think are the most glamorous can be very rewarding. One of the things that impressed me the most working for Image Movers Digital was on A Christmas Carol, which the subject matter was not very attractive to a lot of us artists because it's been a story that's been adapted over 50 times in film up to that point. And I think Dermot and his philosophy of looking for story and design on that project was so impressive to me that he completely changed my perspective of that project based on how he was interpreting his assignments, which was really cool.
That's great. That's awesome. Okay, next question. How did you go about starting school for your current position? I'm guessing that they wanted to know, going after education, aiming at what you're doing now. I know that it was also a very circuitous path for you, so you can address that however you want.
Yeah, for me, like, I looked at a few different schools, and I went and I visited the campuses and tried to get access to departments that I was curious about. And the reason why I chose Columbus College of Art and Design was essentially their 3D illustration program. They had an amazing workshop where they were doing like alginate molds and animatronics. Funny enough, they worked on the Playboy Mansion's Halloween haunted house. They would make creatures and things, and I got an opportunity to work on this spider. It was maybe a 7-foot wide animatronic spider. This was my freshman year in college. I was working at the school in the department. That's how I got this opportunity. And it was a laser triggered animatronic. So it'd be, like 10 feet up in the shadows. And as you walk by, it trips a laser that makes it come down from the ceiling.
Wow.
And I'm like, this is just so cool. But
yeah,
the 3D to me was some of the most enticing, and it evolved, like, because I'm not doing 3D now, but I like just being involved in a creative process in a way that is influential and helps is really, like what I ultimately wanted to do. So I guess the point is dabble and try different things. Look at, schools and look at what the students are doing. And if you have opportunities, like Adam, you told me Gnomon has a Discord where, young creatives can interact with one another.
Yeah.
My experience was having like a camaraderie with other students is very important, because some schools can be highly competitive to the point where it's stressful and kind of toxic. And for me, in my development, when it was more collaborative and more friendly, I learned so much more because we were all feeding off of each other in such a positive way that we were all growing together. So
Totally.
that would be my advice as well with that.
Awesome. Next question is, it sounds like somebody, I like this. This is a pipeline oriented question. What is your biggest request from character artists, or I guess with live action would be like the production team, when producing work? Do they ask for more views or angles on a concept, or something else?
Oh, sorry. We just had a delivery. Yeah. I'm in the living room right now. So yeah, it's always different. Every assignment is a little bit different. It depends also, like the information like that I give can be interpreted sometimes from something incredibly loose, because the armory departments, the costume departments, like they're so talented that they also have their own takes and their own ideas, and they can build off of something even if it's something not very like detailed or refined. And sometimes that is the case. I need to give them something detailed and refined and something from different views, especially if it's armor. The back view is important because what is that? What's behind them? Or a side view, like 3/4 sometimes. So it really just depends on what it is. Because in my experience, like with gaming, like in the game industry, is I generally have to do a lot more orthographics a lot of times. So like front, side, back, 3/4, and then like detail shots of like helmets or heads or whatever. But it's not as in depth for at Lucasfilm because it's like everyone's so talented that we work with that they can work with very little, you know.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So the next question is, what should we do as students for being in an internship in a studio like Lucasfilm? And I know that Lucasfilm or ILM has started the what was it again? I forget what they call it, like Join the Force, and I know that they're looking to bring in younger students and stuff like that. So if someone wanted to prepare themselves for an internship like that as a younger artist, any tips?
Ooh. I have to plead ignorance with the internships that Lucasfilm has. I'm actually not too familiar with what their programs are, but I would say, like, just generally an internship, the best thing to be prepared is to just allow yourself to be a sponge when you're there, just to absorb as much as you can, and to just like it's like you're a plant. You should think of yourself as a plant, and you're just absorbing that sunlight. And it's been a gloomy day for a long time, and it's the first awesome day of sunlight. Like, just absorb as much as you can, because I think that's the biggest takeaway of an internship, as not looking at it as like being the opportunity that'll translate to you're doing great work, we're going to give you a job. It's not so much that, it's we're going to expose you to a lot of stuff, and after the internship you take that fuel and you build off of that fuel and you start working on a portfolio, and then you can always apply to an entry level position later. But I think that's the best way to look at it. And also, even if you feel like you're not prepared, and I think a lot of artists, when they're young and they get an opportunity like that, or if there is an opportunity and they're afraid to apply to it, don't be. Like, I think if you're not feeling like you're not prepared, then you're overconfident, because you should feel a little nervous. The nervousness is good, because that's exciting. You know, that is an exciting nervousness. So don't be afraid, just apply, and then just, be like a flower, just absorb that energy.
That was very, I feel like you're channeling Ian McKeg there. Just
I was
be
going to
like
say
a
Big
plant on the
Lebowski,
first.
but
Yeah,
hey,
oh,
man,
okay.
just be like a flower,
That excellent advice, and I love that perspective on an internship, because I think a lot of people do go in internships thinking like this has to turn into a job, but circling back to what you said about don't be afraid of closing doors. It's just a door and there'll be another one. I think that's great.
But I will
Okay.
say this: just always be thankful, be gracious. Like, it's a small industry. Be just the most wonderful human you can be. That gets you really far. And being adversarial can be very limiting towards your growth. So that's equally important as well.
Yeah. Someone's wanting to know, when you started out in the beginning, anything you'd like to share of how you kept up your confidence to continue on your path? What would be an example of how you, maybe dealt with some self-doubt and overcame it?
Yeah, it happens. It still happens. Like, it's funny how, the inner saboteur, I think you mentioned earlier, is something I think it's just very common with creatives. And it's easier to destroy than to create. So the art of creation is chaotic. It's all the emotions. Self-doubt's one of them. It's also the lack of confidence in what you're doing. I also am an artist that tends to not like my work for too long, even. And honestly, like that's something that's constantly can be a struggle, is enjoying what you're doing and to being kind to yourself, to allow yourself to enjoy it, to not
Yeah.
allowing the pressures of your deadlines and your responsibilities outweigh your love for the craft, right? And it's a balance. So for me, hobbies do help, like decompressing, getting away from your workstation and allowing yourself to be flexible when you get those opportunities, that you can be flexible to decompress and come back and see it in a different way, really helps. Because like I can be the type of artist that sits down and just like is brutal to myself to just sit down and not get up until it's done. And
Yeah.
and that comes with mixed results
Hmm. Hmm.
because sometimes the best way to do it is to walk away, come back, and you're like, that's not quite right. And then sometimes I'll go back a previous version and be like, yep, glad I walked away because that last hour and a half was a waste of time. And then
Yeah.
you
Okay.
just go back to the previous, and
Hmm.
then there's just a few marks you make, and then you're there. And I've also had other, struggles where, you know, like some deadlines. Like I remember an assignment where I had an afternoon deadline the next day. I was working late, and it was just a battle. I felt like I was in full armor and I was just getting swallowed. And I gave up and I went to bed and I couldn't sleep. And
Oh
I just
man.
was thinking, and then I got back up and I'm like, all right, I think I know what I need to do. And I got back up, and it took 20 minutes. And just because like just something would not allow me to throw in the towel just yet. But 20 minutes of, I don't know what it was. Sometimes like that just happens organically like that.
Hmm.
But a couple of marks and it's like that's it. And then I went to bed, turned it in, and it was done. But there's no set model, right? Like that's what
Sure.
I've found. It's like there's only like a philosophy that you can try and adhere to: being kind to yourself, taking breaks, understanding like when to fight, when to back off with your art. It's important in the long run because it's not a sprint race, and that's the thing that I have to constantly remind myself is like, look, I'm in this for the long haul, and you can't constantly run a sprint race and expect yourself
Right.
to sustain that momentum.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's great advice too. I like sometimes the creative brain just needs a breath.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Next question is, what artists do you look up to and draw inspiration from?
I have a list, actually, just so
Are you
that
prepared or?
I have a lot more than this, but these are
Okay.
ones that I knew this question was going to come up. So like, when I was younger, it was obviously a lot of comic artists, but professionally, so like since college, like the ones that have like defined a lot of my sensibilities were like J.C. Linedecker, Robert McGinnis, and then obviously, of course, like Ralph McQuarrie and Joe Johnston and Mobius and Sid Mead and Frazetta I've mentioned, Topi, Ian McKay, Dermot Power, English concept artists Adam Brockbank, Rob Bliss, even Glenn Dillon. Like there's so many. Like
Yeah.
it's just like I really like art that feels effortless, and it feels like there's like a bit of the person in their art, even if it's
Mm.
commercial
Hmm.
art. If you can kind of see that, it's funny when you see art and then you either meet or you see the artist in interviews, you're like, oh, that makes sense. for whatever reason that makes sense. Like it feels like it's a part of them, you know. That's always the art that I've been attracted to. Yeah.
I mean, I'd say that your art is recognizable in the same way.
It's funny, like I think artists,
yeah.
like I don't know what I'm about to say might be pretty common, but I have a hard time. I feel so derivative of a lot of my influences. I guess it's good to have a lot of different influences so that, you know, you can see where you're like pulling in inspiration from instead of just like one or two. But I do like, I'm like, I do feel like I am derivative of quite a few of my inspirations for sure. And maybe that just goes with the generations, you know, as you go.
I think so. I've heard most artists will say that about their own work. Like, all I can see is behind the curtain. I can't see, you know, what's in front of the curtain with the art. But no, I mean, man, when your design for Din Djarin was, when I started seeing some of your concepts for the Mandalorian when they were released to the public, because I was already familiar with some of your designs and your personal work on the Star Wars IP. I was like, oh, that's Brian. That's got to be him. They got to be using him to make this stuff, and I think it is recognizable. But it's totally common for the artist to be like, I don't know what you see. I don't know why you're saying that, because all I see is all the pieces that
Maybe
go
it's just
into
because
it.
we do it. We do it, right? And we know the process, we know the struggles, we know what it took to make those images, and then they're out there. And when they're out there, they're not yours anymore. They're just like kind of in a weird way, sort of public domain, and you know they become everyone's, at least you know everyone's, if it resonates with anyone. So yeah, it's interesting, but yeah, I don't know.
Awesome.
I still am surprised when people tell me that.
Well, it probably goes part and parcel with being that what you said earlier. Like, don't, you know, you need to be a good human and be curious and not feel like you've arrived and, you know, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we are at, or just a little bit past that 30-minute mark.
Well, you can take one more question. How about that?
Okay, one more?
Yeah,
all right, cool.
Pick one more question.
I'll pick the very next question because I think it's a great question. What advice would you give to a self-taught concept artist, so someone who has not been able to pursue formalized education?
It's interesting because, like, you know, when it comes to college and whether or not, if you want to do a formalized education or not, and how expensive formalized education can be, I think because there's so much versatility with how you can learn. I think for self-taught artists, it's important to learn professional skill sets if you want to become a long-term concept artist in the industry, because one of the common things that can happen is you, like, let's say you get recognized for work that you do online, and then that becomes a career, or it becomes professional work that you're getting consistently. When you get that professional assignments that are now, you know, assignments that are given to you with direction, with deadlines, you then have to become, like, you have to modify what you already know, and with that modification, it can be a negative, where then you adapt to what you have to do, the appropriateness. Like, being a concept artist inherently is appropriate problem solving. That is really the inherent definition of what we do. And I think for, like, self-taught concept artists, it's really important to learn better practices for that before you dive into the deep end, because then you can harden yourself into a professional, you know, craftsman in a capacity that might not be conducive to versatility, or, you know, or even sustainability. So I think it's good to look at people that are professionals and to reach out to them. You'd be surprised if you could get mentorships. Like a lot of them do offer mentorship programs with very specialized, specific training from people that are working in a sustainable capacity. And if it's work that you like, I mean, that you admire, even better. But I would recommend that. I would recommend, like just any piecemeal tools of understanding and learning that you don't possess, and to adapt those to your process. Whether it is like, like the Gnomon DVDs, or even just specific classes that you can, get a la carte, either online or in person, with schools that you like, the work and the instructors. Like, you can kind of a la carte build your education now, which is really cool. That's a new opportunity. But I definitely think when I hear self-taught concept artists, like self-taught artists, there's fantastic self-taught artists out there. But I think in order to be a successful concept artist, you have to be very versatile. And that versatility does require you to expand outside of your pool of knowledge in order to be successful at it.
Yeah, great answer. Possibly one of the most comprehensive I've heard for that question, because I know that there's a lot of people out there that are just like, I can't go to full-time school right now, but how do I make the best use of my time? And I think, again, it's a running theme here today, Brian. You're pointing us back to not scarcity mentality, but to thinking generatively, like, what is at my disposal?
Right.
If I can't do this, there's probably this thing that I can do. And if you do what you can, it generally leads to the next thing that you can do. So it's awesome. Well, it's hard to stop, but I mean, I could talk about all of this stuff all day and through the weekend and whatever. But thank you for being so generous with your time. But I think also you've been really generous and self-disclosing with your answers. Whether that's about your process or whether it's about your own struggles and things that you're working with. This has been a fantastic conversation, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And just to plug for May the 4th, I'm going to be at Star Wars Celebration on Saturday. And myself, Doug Chang, and the rest of the art department are going to do a Q&A, and I believe it's between 5 and 6 p.m. I don't know where yet, but I think a lot of that information is going to get disclosed a little later in the month. But
Awesome.
If anyone in the audience is going to be there, this is what I look like. So just say hi if you're there.
This is what I look like. So you're not going to like cut your hair really short and shave your beard or something like that before Star Wars Celebration and be completely unrecognizable.
If I want to go incognito, I'll do that.
Yeah,
I have a lumpy head. I don't think anyone would recognize me if I just shave my head.
Like it works well for being a creature, though. Works really well for that.
Yeah, it's true.
We've got Brian's Instagram handle up on the screen. If you haven't followed Brian already, I would strongly encourage you to do that. Not just for seeing the content that he's creating, but I think you're really generous with your explanations behind when you post something. You talk about the story behind that post, or even stuff like showing your marker sketch. So I definitely encourage following Brian on social media. I will be at Star Wars Celebration. I hope that a bunch of you will be there as well. It's going to be awesome. And there was one other thing I wanted to mention, but I can't remember what it was. So it's probably just my brain. Have a great rest of your day, sir. I'm sure you've got plenty of things to jump into. So have fun in doing it, and keep the magic alive.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Adam.
Then, absolutely. Thank you, Brian. We'll say farewell, and you guys can give your love in the chat.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thanks for having me, and thank you everyone for tuning in. This was fun.
Awesome. Hope to see you again soon.
All right. May the 4th be with you.
And also with you, sir. All right. Guys, I'm going to transition really quickly because I did mention at the top of the stream, I'm going to take just a little bit of time at the end here to share with you a little bit about Gnomon. Again, just piggybacking on the idea that Brian was sharing about, finding what you can do. I will also be talking about individual classes that Gnomon does do, so you don't have an option for full-time. There's some great things there. But while I get that set up, I just wanted to bring my colleague, Xander, up on the screen, who is one of Gnomon's admissions advisors. Hey, Xander.
Hey.
Yeah, great. And thank you for being in the chat with everybody and, being available and answering questions and dropping the links. But this is something that we haven't done before that I'm really happy that we are doing it. Admissions at Gnomon is really different. And I think our admissions advisors and the services that you guys provide to students interested in Gnomon is sometimes one of our best kept secrets. Even though we try to shout it from the rooftops. So while I get my PowerPoint about Gnomon ready to go, would you mind taking just a few seconds and share with these guys about what is different about admissions and your availability in the chat to them today?
Sure. Yeah. Well, as Brian was, he kind of reminded me of, why we're so different. And it's, when he was talking about self-teaching and getting started in art, I think that our admissions process is different because it reflects just how unique it is to get into computer graphics, which is that people get into this from all sorts of directions and backgrounds. And so instead of just, if you're thinking about applying to a program here or taking classes here, instead of just filling out a form and putting your portfolio in there, not knowing if it's good enough and just sending it off once and getting back a yes or no, for us, it's more of a conversation. Before applying, and this is what I really have to emphasize because I am an artist for all artists. We know it's very vulnerable to put yourself out there and not even show artwork, but just ask a question. But I can't emphasize this enough. Before applying, please introduce yourself to us. We have a team here of admissions artists, not just myself, but a few of my colleagues here, and Adam, including Adam. If you ever wanted to reach out and just, say, hey, I'm thinking about this. I know I'm not ready to apply yet. I'm not even sure if this is the right school for me, but can I talk to someone? Absolutely. We provide portfolio feedback if you're just getting started and you've never done 3D before, you've never done art before. We can point you in the right direction of classes, resources, things to try out at home, like free software. So yeah, that's just kind of our admissions process in a nutshell, is that it's
awesome,
custom tailored to every individual person.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Xander. And while I'm just taking a few minutes now to share a little bit about Gnomon with you, do know that Xander's going to be in the chat and totally ready to have a conversation with you while I'm talking. So if you already have a question you want to ask, go for it. If a question comes up in response to something that I'm sharing, just know that Xander's ready for you in the chat. But let's finish out our last 15 minutes or so by jumping into this. Let's see. I'll send you back to the chat, sir. Back to the trenches. All right. Yeah. All right. So essentially, as I said at the beginning, Gnomon is a 3D art school. We've been around for 25 years. We teach artists and train them to be career ready for working in animation, video games, the VFX for film, and so forth. This has continued to be a very rapidly growing industry. There is not a scarcity of work out there. The main thing is getting the right training for the demand, because the demand is high for artists working in these fields. You got to get the training. And that's where Gnomon comes in, and that's what we strive for. These are just some awards we've won over the years. Really, really important stuff, but I want to jump into what's possibly the most important thing about Gnomon, and that is getting a job as an artist, having a career, starting that career. These are all projects that Gnomon graduates have contributed to. And these are many of the studios that you would be familiar with who regularly hire graduates from our full-time program. There's well over 800 studios just in the Los Angeles area alone, but this is just a sampling. But the really important part is what you see across the top of the screen here, and that is what we call industry placement, our rate of placing students in the industry. The way that we define that is the percentage of graduates from our full-time program that year, so that we're talking about 2020, a pandemic year, and continues into this year as well. 94% of our graduates from our full-time programs started their first job in studio doing the same discipline that they studied at Gnomon within 6 months of finishing the program. So we don't count getting coffee for executives at Disney or doing some non-related job for a studio. It has to be working in that pipeline that you've trained for at Gnomon. And that is the thing that drives our entire education at our school. We want to be graduating industry-ready artists that are getting hired. So what do we teach? In a term, it is digital production. Digital production is sort of a catch-all phrase that includes the following disciplines: computer-based visual effects, character and creature design, which of course we're talking about today with Brian, digital sculpting, animating those characters and creatures, environment design, lighting and rendering those environments, matte painting, compositing, creating assets and props and environments and characters for games, working within game engines, workflows for these productions, and world building. Now, all of those skills translate into these jobs. So each one of these titles you see on the screen represents a career path unto itself. Like this is its own career path. And all of those disciplines that I was talking about earlier are used in these. These are the most typical careers that our students are going on to work in. Now, we don't have time to get into all of them, but I did want to highlight just four of them for you. So we'll start out with character artists. And what a character artist does is exactly what the name implies. This is an artist who is making the actual character or creature in 3D that you are going to be seeing on screen in a game or a film of some sort. So in order to accomplish that and make very lifelike characters and creatures, these artists are using software, which Brian mentioned earlier in our conversation, ZBrush, which essentially lets you use traditional sculpting techniques with 3D digital clay. So it's perfect for doing the kind of thing that you see here. This is typically a job that relates really well to people who are spending a lot of time drawing characters and creatures, perhaps. Or maybe you started out sculpting maquettes and things like that, and you want to use those skills to make awesome characters and creatures for the entertainment industry. This could be an awesome pathway for you. Next up are effects artists. I know I say it almost every stream, and I love to say it. If the pipeline, the members of the digital production pipeline were the party of a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, the effects artists would be the wizard or the sorcerer. These are the artists that are summoning literally the elements of the universe, actual simulations of physics like smoke and fire and water and gravity and so forth. But they're using those simulations to drive super complex animated scenes like this. And they need to do it that way because they are that complex, and you can't go in and move each individual moving part by hand like you would say for a character. So if doing amazing stuff like this is appealing to you, if you're one of those people that's like, you just always gravitate towards the VFX shot, or you're watching for maybe how it's done, this could be a great career for you. Next up, we're going to go almost nearly to the end of the digital production pipeline to a position called compositing. What a compositor does is, like what you're seeing on the screen here, they're weaving all of the different pieces together to make a final finished shot like this. This is commonly used for shots like this, an establishing shot for a location, in a location that either doesn't exist or is just going to be more efficiently executed this way. So they're not the person making all of the 3D models and things that you see going into the scene, but they get all of those, the filmed footage and 3D models and a lit, rendered environment, stuff like that. They get all those things from other artists in the pipeline, and then being at the end of the pipeline is the one who knows how to put it all together to tell that story, to get that scene across. And they get to work their magic so that the audience generally has no idea that it was that many different pieces and not an actual physical location. So for the last example, we're going to go now all the way to the beginning of the digital production pipeline for film, and we're going to take a look at what Pre-Vis artists do. If you're familiar with what storyboarding is, this started as a way to draw images sequentially, kind of like a comic book, to convey what is happening in each scene or each beat of a scene for a film. Generally, there's also going to be visual notes on the direction that the camera is going to be panning and all this stuff. It's a way of kind of getting a sketch of the film out. Well, now artists, utilizing 3D animation and 3D models can do it in movement. They can communicate so much more to get the idea across. So these are going to be people who enjoy working in 3D, enjoy animating in 3D, but rather than spending countless months on just one scene or one part of the film, they want to work closely with the director and the cinematographer to tell the big picture story. So they're using more simplified animation and models, but they get to do it all kind of, and they get to animate how the camera is going to move, and they get notes from the director and the cinematographer and just bring it all together. And this is what people are going to be looking at further down the pipeline as sort of the common vision that the director is handing out, say, this is what it needs to look like. This is how the scenes need to come across. So if that's you, if you're like kind of like a director trapped in an animator's body and you want to do both of those disciplines, this could be a great place for you in the pipeline. So with those examples in mind, I just want to share very briefly about Gnomon's academic offerings. What are the different options to train in these disciplines at Gnomon? Up in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see we offer a full 4-year degree program. That's a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in digital production. We also have something just next to it called a certificate program. This also is a full-time program, but it's a little bit more akin to a master's level of study. So it's going to be more advanced, more intensive than the 4-year degree program. And on the bottom row here, we have something called a Foundation in Art and Design. This is a course designed to help you build your portfolio. If you do not have a portfolio put together, if you need to get in and learn those foundational art skills, like Brian was talking about, and also learn how to translate that into a portfolio to apply to Gnomon, this is a great way to onboard into that if you need those things. Lastly, as I mentioned earlier, we have quite a few of our classes from our full-time program are also offered as individual classes. So these would be single 10-week long classes that meet once per week for 3 hours, where you get the opportunity to kind of do that piecemeal thing that Brian was talking about and say, hey, I'm not in a position to go to a full-time program, but I would like to learn ZBrush, or I would like to start learning Maya, or I would like to start learning how to animate. We will present those options to you. You don't have to apply. You can simply enroll in a class, but our advisors also are available to help you out knowing where's the right place for you to start in those individual classes. So I want to take a closer look at just a couple of these options, starting with our 4-year degree program. This is fully accredited, which means financial aid is available and so forth. It's going to be full-time on the Gnomon campus in Hollywood, and you will be starting in some like foundational art skills and then quickly building into starting to learn 3D. And as you do that, go through the entire full-time program, you will learn the entire digital production pipeline. We will teach you all of the jobs. Why is that important? Because that is what studios are looking for. The reason why Gnomon students are sought after by studios is because they might be hiring that graduate as a junior animator at Disney or something like that. But they know that in getting that junior artist, they're getting someone that doesn't just know the animation or the thing that they're going to be doing, but they know how everything else works, makes them an excellent team player, and makes them a great problem solver, just like we were talking about earlier with Brian. So that's what you'll be doing, but then you get some options that present themselves that allow you to concentrate on either game art or VFX, or you stay with that kind of generalist, learning the whole pipeline, and you pick out some electives. So you can kind of tailor it as you're going through it. So the game art concentration is going to open up classes that will teach you how to do those steps in the production pipeline, but to do them specifically within game engines for going on and working in a game studio. Or if you're interested in being a VFX artist, the VFX concentration is going to open up additional, more advanced VFX classes to you in the 4-year program. If you don't pick one of those concentrations, everyone also has the opportunity to pick out 4 electives in their last 4 terms in the program. So you get to learn everything as your foundation. You get this really robust foundation in digital production. And then on top of that, you get to build additional skills in the area that you're planning on going out and working in. And that will make you a kind of a ninja as a junior artist going and starting your career to start working in studio. The full-time program at Gnomon has a rolling admission, and all that means is fall is not the only time that you can apply and get in. You can apply in the fall, the winter, the spring, or the summer, and start into the same point in the curriculum. Moving forward means that we have students graduating 4 times out of the year, and you can choose to stay on for all of your summer terms, which will allow you to finish the program. You get 4 years of education, but you finish it in 3 years, so you can get out there and get working that much faster. So additional questions about the Bachelor's of Fine Arts degree program at Gnomon, Xander's in the chat, ready to help you out. As I mentioned, the 2-year certificate program is all of that type of training, but it is going to be more advanced, more intensive. It's going to be a little bit more like a master's degree type of study. This is typically utilized by artists who may already have an art degree from another school, and they want to get in, just kind of get that Navy SEALs, really quick, intensive digital production training. But if you have interest in that, again, Xander can point you in the right direction to learn about the differences between those two programs. Now, the first two examples I showed you, these are full-time programs that require a portfolio application to be admitted into the program. That also is what Xander was talking about earlier. We will coach you and help you make that portfolio. We will tell you exactly what we are looking for and help you along the way. The next two options I'm going to highlight are our foundation in art and design, which does not require a portfolio to apply. You can enroll in the foundation in art and design by simply talking with a Gnomon advisor and having them help you get started in this. What this is going to be is a 1-year course, and you don't have to take all 4 terms of that year. You can also piecemeal that according to what you and your advisor have talked about, areas you might still need to fill out your skill set in before you apply to Gnomon. But you're going to get into classes like foundational things like visual communication, figure drawing, anatomy for artists. We'll start teaching about drawing within perspective, character design, creature design, environment design, vehicles, mechs, a lot of that entertainment design kind of foundational stuff to get you into learning design language and how to communicate effectively as an artist and designer. All of that's going to be necessary to build 3D on top of, because 3D is a medium. It is not a completely separate, it's not different than the things about art that have always been true. So if you learn solid art and design skills, then when you move into a 3D medium, you're going to be able to make things and animate things in 3D that are built on that stuff that is going to be creating quality images, telling excellent stories. So foundation is available should you need that. Again, you can talk with advisors about that. Lastly, I'll just say, as I mentioned before, we have individual classes at Gnomon. Over 70 of our classes are available individually. Some of them are available online as well. Xander can point you towards links to our website or additional resources to research those. But this is a great way if you are already a high school graduate. Maybe you're in community college, or maybe you're already out there working and you're interested in pivoting your career or learning more about the things that Gnomon is teaching. It's a great way to start that process. And should you eventually want to enter into a full-time program, these are also accredited classes that can transfer into that, or you could take them just simply standalone as part of the education that you're trying to put together for yourself as an artist. It's also a great option for anyone who just wants to get a taste of what it is like to learn at Gnomon, be able to pick up a valuable skill set and get a better understanding of what it's like to be a student at our school. A lot of community college students will do that before they transfer to Gnomon, kind of get a taste of it, get an understanding of what this is about. So the last thing I'll mention, and really Xander already did a fantastic job of explaining this, and this is, if you're interested in Gnomon, talk to one of these guys. That's what it comes down to. We are here to help you. We want to answer whatever question you have. There's no question that you can ask that is going to somehow diminish you in their eyes. They are looking for inquisitive, driven, hungry artists that are looking for someone to help them. And if you are interested in our programs, they will let you know what we want to see in your portfolio. They will ask to look at your artwork, and they will help you build a portfolio that caters to your strengths and your interests, that will help answer what we need to see in order to admit you into our program. So I can't stress that enough. I know it's very different than what a lot of other colleges do, which is the reason why a lot of people don't know that they can do this. But case in point, Xander's right there in the chat for you guys to get that started. And he can send you a link to even just share your information, give our admissions team a ping and say, hey, send me an email. I want to get started talking with you. I'll just finish by saying, guys, it's really important to Gnomon that we are, around this full-time program in this school, we want to create an ecosystem and a hub where artists can thrive. A big part of that is like live streams like we're doing right now. These are things that we want to be available to everyone. once we're in a position to do this again with, COVID protocols and all that, we do a lot of, events on campus. We have gallery shows that we do on campus. Here's some examples of live streamed events that we've done. If you head over to our YouTube channel, you will find well over 100 fantastic, freely viewable, informational, streams. You'll find demo streams. You'll find ongoing series about character design and character sculpture. We have some awesome ongoing live stream programs like Creature Corner, Sculpting and ZBrush with Jared Kraszewski, as well as A Voice in the Hollow, which is two fantastic artists who are also instructors at Gnomon and working in the industry, creating an entire short cinematic in Unreal Engine. So if any of that interests you, we invite you to stick around and continue to partake of what Gnomon is. So guys, I want to thank you again for those of you stuck around even for this informational session. Again, big thanks to Brian Matyas for taking the time out to join us and really sharing some very valuable insight, perspective, stories, information about who he is as an artist. So it was great being a part of his journey. And I'll say, guys, stay safe, stay creative, and the 4th will be with you always. Thank you very much.